So having introduced the more complex cortical architecture and shown how it can handle regular visual processing, let's go back to the earlier rabbit-chased giraffe phrase and see how it's processed in this more detailed cortical model. First, the word rabbit is heard. The sounds in the word activate a group of independent column populations in the discriminate sounds level. The outputs from these populations are synchronized and released to the discriminates phonemes and pauses level, where they activate populations corresponding with, say, the ra and the bit complex sounds. The outputs from these populations drive a population in the discriminates words area correlating with the presence of the word rabbit. The population at the word level indirectly activates a visual population similar to the population that would be activated if a rabbit were actually seen. This population is strongest in the discriminates objects area, but weaker activations may be present in the features and qualified objects areas. In other words, if when the word columns were active, attention often tended to be focused on the tail, at least sometimes, some columns in the features area that correlate with tails will be activated. If many of the rabbits were brown, some columns correlating with the presence of a brown rabbit will tend to be activated in the qualified objects area. But the predominant population will be at the discriminates objects level. The activity of this visual population is prolonged, and the word chased is heard. Auditory columns are again activated through a sequence of auditory areas. And the word chased indirectly activates a rather more complex combination of populations in the visual areas. Because the word has been heard when looking at scenes in which objects were being chased and also objects were doing chasing, that adds complexity to the population combination. Two populations are activated at the object relationships level at different phases of frequency modulation. The subjective experience of one population will be as if something vague was chasing, and the other as if something vague was being chased. In addition, a population will be activated at the groups of objects level, corresponding with a subjective experience of something vague chasing something vague. Then, if the types of objects often chased have some similarities, and the objects doing the chasing also have some similarities, there will be two populations at the objects and qualified objects levels at different phases of modulation, corresponding with the sort of objects often chased and the sort of objects often doing the chasing. The outputs from the two populations in the discriminates words area are synchronized and released to the discriminates groups of words area, generating a population in the groups of words area. This population correlates with the presence of a combination of words and has recommendation strengths in favor of releasing receptive field detections between specific visual cortical areas. Firstly, synchronization and release of the outputs from the rabbit and the something chasing populations in the discriminates objects area to the discriminates qualified objects level, where a slightly enhanced population is activated at the same modulation phase as the population activated by hearing rabbit. Then the outputs from the enhanced rabbit population are synchronized and released to the discriminates object relationships area at the modulation phase of the existing something chasing population in that area. That will drive additional receptive field detections in the object relationships area, creating a population similar to one that will be activated by actually seeing a rabbit chase something. However, because seeing a rabbit chasing something will be a novel experience, receptive field expansions are required to achieve an appropriate population in response to these inputs. At this point, the populations in the discriminates features, discriminates objects, and discriminates qualified objects areas that were indirectly activated by hearing the word rabbit are extinguished. and also the populations indirectly activated in the discriminates objects and discriminates qualified objects areas that correlate with something chasing are extinguished. But the population in the discriminates objects relationships correspond with rabbit chasing is prolonged. And as I mentioned, this population is similar to the one that would have been activated if actually seeing a rabbit chasing something. The activity of the something being chased and something chasing something populations that were indirectly activated by hearing the word chased are still being prolonged. Now the word giraffe is heard, activating columns in the discriminates words area at a different modulation phase from the existing rabbit and chased populations. This new orderly population indirectly activates populations in the features, the objects, and the qualified objects areas, but strongest in the objects area. As before, there is a sequence of synchronization and release behaviors that drive an enhanced population at the object relationships level. This population is similar to one that would be activated if actually seeing a giraffe being chased. This is perhaps a little novel, but not quite as novel as seeing a rabbit chasing something, so there could be a little bit of receptive field expansion taking place. Receptive fields detected at the auditory groups of words level now recommend synchronization and release of outputs from the object relationships visual area at the same modulation frequency as the existing population in that area that correlates with something chasing something. This release drives an enhanced population that's similar to the population that would be activated if a rabbit chasing a giraffe was actually seen. But again, such a scene has never actually been seen before, and receptive field expansions are needed to bring the population to the minimum level. So the sequence of processes creates a population of active columns in the object relationships and the groups of objects areas, as if looking at a rabbit chasing a giraffe. And because of the ordering of the sequence, this population is quite different from the one that will be activated by looking at a giraffe chasing a rabbit.